Thank you. Good afternoon. We're here at Streatley Crematorium, West Chapel, to celebrate the life of Dave Robert Watkins, and also to celebrate today the golden wedding anniversary of Dave and Dot. Although this is a civil ceremony, there will be a period of reflection which some may wish to use for prayer, and will be saying the Lord's Prayer. This service is also being webcast live for those unable to attend today. Dave passed away on the 6th of September. He was 76. He was known as a brother, as a husband, a father and father-in-law, a granddad and great-granddad, an uncle and great-uncle, a cousin, a work colleague, a friend and neighbour. It's fitting that tributes to his life should come from those who knew and loved him best. The following words are from his family, and the first tribute is from a work colleague and friend, Bob Hayworth.
Dave, Doc, the Guru, whatever names or nickname that I use, or whichever of the many adjectives that folk have sent me or posted online to describe him: committed, dedicated, quiet but strongly determined, kind, wise, a gentleman. Nothing I can say is going to do rightful justice to the man that I was so privileged to know and to work with. Dave and I were just a year apart in age, and we both started our Dunlop careers in the mid-60s. At that time, Dave was already a successful cyclist, and in those days, the question of amateur status in sport needed to be both jealously guarded and delicately handled. Sponsorship wasn't always as open as it is today. Dunlop still made cycle tyres, and maybe it was an early example of veiled sports sponsorship. They gave Dave a job on the test fleet, where he was officially and practically a test rider, road testing bicycle tyres. As established bicycle racers, riding 100 miles a day was not only an easy task for him and his friend Roy Cox, but it also served as part of their training programme. Dave clocked up a list of significant achievements during the 60s. He was British cycling champion. He represented England at the Kingston, Jamaica Commonwealth Games in 1966. In 67, he represented Great Britain at the World Cycling Championships. Also in 67, he was Division 4,000 metre team pursuit champion, along with Trevor Bull, Fred Booker and Roy Cox. 68, he was 5-mile grass champion. And in 69, he became 800 metre sprint grass champion. But then, in 1972 in Berlin, just before the Olympics, Dave's career as an international racer came to a violent and abrupt end. As I understand it, he was in flying form, sprinting, when he fell from the top of the bank track and hit a metal pillar. His injuries were so severe that it was feared he might never walk again, let alone ride. But ride again he did. And by 1978, he was a professional sprinter for the Harry Quinn Garley team. 8 years later, he was back at the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh. Only by then, he was the England team manager. Whilst all that was going on, some changes were happening at Dunlop. In the late 70s, early 80s, Dunlop's need for bicycle test riders disappeared, and Dave was about to be out of a job. However, the company did have a vacancy for a motorcycle tyre designer. I've talked to the person who was responsible for filling that vacancy, and I'll repeat what he told me. David wasn't highly technically qualified, but we decided to give him a chance. We arranged for him to learn to ride on one of the smaller test fleet motorbikes. He passed his test, and the rest, as so often said, is history. He became the motorcycle tyre designer and was overwhelmingly respected throughout the industry and by the top professional riders. I asked quite a few of other past Dunlopians for their memories of Dave, and regardless from which corner of the world the replies came, there are two aspects of Dave that were constantly repeated and which certainly reflect the Dave or the Doc that I knew. Dave as a person and Dave the Doc. Two aspects of one man which were inseparable, and a combination which in my experience was so unusual as to be unique. Success of the level which Dave achieved sometimes makes people become distant, difficult to approach, arrogant even. But Dave was never any of those things. Unquestionably, he was very professional, but he was also a very unassuming person, never seeking the limelight for himself. Jim Allen from Dunlop North America summed it up beautifully. In his words, Dave showed people, by the simple example of living his own life, how to be a better, kinder, and more gentle person. Someone else I contacted was Jerry Sansom, the general manager that I succeeded. When I asked him for his memories of Dave, his immediate response was simply, "How do you sum up a person who was so influential in Dunlop's motorsport business and so highly respected throughout the motorcycle race world?" One of Jerry's memories was the nomadic existence that Dave's team of design engineers led as they followed the motorcycle race circus around the globe. Nothing unusual about that in top-level motorsport, but what he particularly recalled was how deeply Dave cared about the welfare of his staff in them doing that. He also recalled the rather special relationships that Dave built with his Dunlop and his Sumitomo colleagues around the world, and with his customers, racers like the legendary Kenny Roberts and the then young Valentino Rossi. Something stuck in his memory was the respect Dave had for our Japanese colleagues and the way they had rescued our business. Wind on to 1995, and Dave had the chance to repay them. A devastating earthquake in Kobe completely destroyed Sumitomo's factory there, and they asked Motorsport Division to help by stepping in and supplying the very demanding Japanese market with large volumes of race tyres. What a key figure Dave was in achieving that. It was Dave who put together a case strong enough to get the factory investment needed, and it was Dave who devised new mould finishes and processes that met the needs of the Japanese market. Dave may have had a lot of respect for our Japanese colleagues, but I remember that they also developed a lot of respect for him. It wasn't only his technical abilities and people relationships that made him so special. Dave also had an eye for commercial opportunities, particularly if some technical innovation might be involved. Chronologically, I'm jumping to and fro, but in 1989, Roy Webster was the then newly appointed General Manager of Motorsport, and he had been given a very clear brief: improve its financial position or close it. Roy recalled that he arrived at a business that had an annual turnover of £3 million and was posting an annual loss of the same amount. He put a simple question to the whole motorsport team and asked if anyone had any bright ideas for changing that. More than a few answered him along the lines of, "That's your job," but not Dave. Dave put forward an idea that didn't just improve the balance sheet in UK, but became a global success story. Motorcycle racing using road legal race tyres was fairly new at the time. It was dominated by Michelin, who was supplying what was basically a road tyre boosted up a bit for racing. Dave's idea was to take Michelin, the world leader, head on. Why not start with the race tyre, he argued, and adjust the design just enough that it could pass the tests necessary to be classified as road legal. His idea got taken on board. Gary Wassell was sales manager at the time, and he recalled for me how Dave led the development of a tyre to challenge Michelin, despite them having resources that Dave could only dream of. He did much of the groundwork himself, spending a lot of time in the States, testing again, mainly at Daytona. Dave's new tyre was very soon market leader, and the global demand grew so high the UK factories simply couldn't make enough. That led North American Dunlop into also making it at their Buffalo factory, and they managed to do so, but only with a lot of help and guidance from Dave. Something vital to this success story and other projects that he led was Dave's relationship with the factory. Competitive sport is all about pushing the boundaries, something which Dave understood long before he joined Dunlop. And Dave understood that as he pushed the boundaries with new concepts, new constructions, it was sometimes a struggle to actually make the products that he had designed. So he spent a lot of time in the factory, working with them, ironing out problems, redesigning if necessary. It was the sort of teamwork that demonstrated the wonderful ability that he had to build relationships. I think it's reflected in a comment was posted by one of his senior production colleagues. Dave Watkins, one of the best people ever to have worked at Dunlop. He was an incredible human being, and I am still yet to meet someone who was as Dunlop through and through. He honestly epitomised everything that was great about the brand, and for me was irreplaceable. It was an absolute pleasure to have both known and worked with you. Your memory for me will live on forever. Around the time that I retired in 2004, Dave became responsible not only for motorcycle race design and development, but for all motorsport tyre design and development, 2 wheels and 4. Dave retired himself in 2010 from a Dunlop which was very different to the company which we had joined 46 years earlier. With his global reputation, it wasn't surprising that he soon found himself being wooed by tyre manufacturers from many corners of the world, all keen to benefit from his expertise. But Dave was a very familiar figure at American motorcycle race events and had become almost a legend amongst the AMA. So first in the queue was Dunlop North America, and he spent the next 3 years as a consultant with them, commuting to Buffalo, 1 week there, 3 weeks back home. Then, a month after that contract ended, he became consultant engineer for GT Tyres, and there his special combination of technical ability and relationship building was clearly undiminished, and he acquired yet another nickname. He remained the doc and the guru to his Dunlop colleagues, but with GT Tyres technical director, Mr. Pang and others, he became known as Uncle Dave. Dave was incredibly good at keeping in touch with his friends and former work colleagues. And it wasn't difficult to work out from his WhatsApp messages whether he was away somewhere or at home. Rarely would a week go by without receiving a cheery "How are you?" message or some amusing video clip from Dave. If it arrived during waking hours, he was probably at home. And if my phone started beeping at 3 o'clock in the morning, he was away in a different time zone again. I shall miss being woken by his messages. Some of the truest words that I can close with, and which describe Dave, the doc, the guru that I knew, come from Jim Allen. It didn't matter to Dave if you were Jim Allen, a journalist, a Dunlop guy, a team manager, a truck driver, a bike washer, a tyre competitor, or a spectator. Everyone got the same counsel and access to the same sincere, honest, and considerate Dave Watkins. Rest in peace, Dave. It was a real privilege to have known and worked with you.
Thank you, Bob. Next will be words from Dave's family. What we wish to convey more than anything is that Dad was very proud of his family, and we were very proud of him. What an adventure to be in Dave's life. Not only was he extraordinary in terms of his involvement in cycling and motorsport, but he was also kind, humble, knowledgeable, passionate, and knew how to enjoy life. As a dad, he would, when able, take us kids everywhere with him, mainly to racetracks, velodromes, and later motorbike racing circuits. Even if we weren't with him, we got to travel the world and would try and spot him in the pit lane. Dad had some very interesting techniques to keep us kids in bed, mainly by terrifying us with scary recitals. One of his favourite films was Scrooge with Albert Finney, and at bedtime he liked to perform, "See the phantoms filling the sky around you, they astound you, I can tell." One thing Dad wasn't was a Scrooge. He loved Christmas, and this is an understatement. I'm sure that there are those present today who have benefited from his spirit, and we became accustomed to making extra places at the dinner table for people to join us. He also made sure he visited his sister Dorothy each Christmas morning. If anyone is worried about the marching band, it will play on. Dad encouraged us in all our endeavours, even if it involved football. He was particularly good at shouting cycling terms at Rob whilst playing, which perplexed other parents. "More speed. Can you taste blood yet?" He could be found strolling up and down the touchline in his wellies, with all the team's tracksuit tops tied around him. C and Dad shared a passion for cycling, and in 2017, Dot and Dave joined her on a trip to Mont Ventoux in Provence. Both track cyclists, this wasn't their natural habitat, but what a special trip it was, and what a motivator to have Dave waiting for you. Natalie gave him the greatest gift of all when she welcomed his grandchildren into the world, Amber, Zeb and Reuben. He was blessed further when he became a great granddad to Lila and Alfie. He had a way with babies. He adored them, as many of you will know from the photos and video clips. On the day before Dave left us, his granddaughter Amber received her latest university results. He was so very proud and called her my 2.1. Dave was also a much-loved father-in-law to Emma, Rob's partner, and to Peach, T's partner. Emma says he was simply a lovely, lovely man. He was kind and will be so very much missed. Dot and Dave joined Peach on several trips when he competed in Ironman competitions, and he will always be grateful for his love and support. Dot and Dave moved to their current home in Leafy Glade in 1988. There have been some legendary parties, both in the house and on the road barbecues. Dave thought the world of his neighbours and loved living there, latterly with Dot, Amber and the two babies. He also took great pleasure in his garden and took plant watering to a new Olympic standard. We also have a family pet, Pinley the tortoise, who has been with us for 47 years. Dave took great pride in making sure that he was hibernated properly, although the hunt for him could take days, and Dave came up with some ingenious tracking techniques. He was famous at home for his bacon butties, and more so for his grandad toast. We will hear lots of what Dave was extraordinarily good at. However, there was one thing that he was absolutely hopeless at, and that was DIY. If there was even a mention of him about to fix something, there would be a collective look of despair throughout the household. On one famous occasion, he was fixing a floorboard at Comsey Road and drove a nail straight through a gas pipe. This resulted in the evacuation of the road. We affectionately referred to him about to do a Frank Spencer. What Dave did have was a great sense of humour. He really liked Monty Python. One of his favourite lines from Life of Brian's, "Always look on the bright side of life. If life seemed jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle. That's the thing. And always look on the bright side of life." What a great philosophy. And what a tremendous life Dave gave us. He touched so many lives, and we are all richer for it. Whether that be family, neighbours, friends, his cycling buddies, Jeff Platten, Graham Rees, Roy Cox, to name but a few. The cyclists he coached, such as Alison Pocket, Ian Berry, Bez, Andrew Tranter, and the British cycling community as a whole. As you heard, in 1986, Dave was the cycling team manager for England in the Edinburgh Commonwealth Games, and we were able to enjoy this experience with him. We also have our world family from motorsport, and many have visited our home, and Dart and Dave have visited them. Jim and Anne Allen, Sab and Tracy Minconi, Neil and Hannah Rampton, Reinhardt and Inga Berrier, Val and the Twinnies, Owen Hughes, again, just to mention a few people. Dave also loved his Dunlop meetups in the UK. We have been surrounded by national, world and Olympic champions, engineers, artists, academics and good people. Dad had a particularly close relationship with Wayne Rainey, motorbike world champion, and they kept in regular contact. As a family, we have received some wonderful and comforting messages from around the world. Many of these messages comment on what a humble man Dave was. Indeed, people from motorsport have commented that they knew Dave rode a bike, but not to what level. And vice versa, cyclists have commentated that they had no idea of Dad's achievement in his job. If Dave shared something of himself or imparted knowledge to you, I hope you were astute enough to listen. What struck us as kids, above all else, was the love between Dot and Dave, Mum and Dad. A comment has been made to Dot that they loved to see them together as they was always holding hands. Dad was a romantic and would bring Dot a bunch of flowers each week. They travelled extensively together. For their 40th wedding anniversary, they embarked on a 6-week trip which took in New Zealand and Australia. But they also loved their weekends away in Bournemouth. Today would have been Mum and Dad's golden wedding anniversary, and what a magical 50 years it was. Simply, thank you, Granddaddy Dave. We love you. they've selected a famous poem that was made famous in the film Carve Her Name with Pride. The life that I have is all that I have, and the life that I have is yours. The love that I have of the life that I have is yours and yours and yours. A sleep I shall have, a rest I shall have, yet death be but a pause, for in the peace of my years, in the long green grass, will be yours and yours and yours. Dave was the youngest of the three children born to Robert and Nancy Watkins. In 1945, he joined older siblings Donald and Dot at the family home in King's Standing, where he grew up, made friends, and went to school. He enjoyed his boyhood years growing up. There were frequent trips to Chinley in Derbyshire to visit his mother's family. For their holidays to Weymouth or the Isle of Wight, Dave would travel by train with his mom, whilst Donald and Dot went in their dad's motorcycle combination. These were typical bucket and spade ball games on the beach affairs, and he enjoyed swimming too. He also liked to draw. He was a fussy eater, and he loved their dog, Juno. Tragically, his mom passed away when he was just 10 years old, and he went to stay with an aunt and uncle in Chinley for a while. He took up cycling seriously at the age of 14 and became a member of the Wyndham Racing Cycling Club, which later amalgamated with the Rover Racing Club, although he practised with the Halesowen Club predominantly. His successes as a sprint racer have already been highlighted by Bob, and they were very impressive. He was working at Dunlop again, covered extensively by Bob as a tyre tester. He met and then married Dot Atkinson in 1971, and they lived in a flat in Handsworth Wood before moving to Great Barr. 3 months after that move, his daughter Celeste was born, and she would be joined by Natalie and Robert. During these times, Dave worked extremely hard, improving his educational qualifications to progress at work. He studied at night school to gain O-levels, and then on to day release at Brooklyn College for an ONC and then a HND in engineering. But it wasn't a case of all work, no play. Early family holidays were to a caravan in Tallybont and then to a hotel in Teignmouth. When the children were at junior school age, they went on a trip to Disneyland in Florida and would return there when they were leaving or about to leave senior school education. In the meantime, there have been trips to the Canary Isle and to Mallorca. Dave's progression from pedal to power has been well documented, as was his expertise in the world of MotoGP. His family time has been spoken about, from his unique parenting skills to his lack of DIY ability and his enjoyment of the garden, which was mostly Dot's domain. The plaudits he's gained from contemporaries and competitors tells its own amazing story. But here's one from a forum about transport in Birmingham. I'll quote it verbatim. I remember that the Rover Club met on a Friday evening at the school in Sherborne Road, Borsall Heath. This would be 65, 66. Not long after, they amalgamated with, I believe, the Wyndham to become the Birmingham Racing Cycling Club. The two club colours, Rover, white shirt, black cuffs and collars, Wyndham in red and yellow, were merged, and they ended up in a jersey that aped the German Republic colours, red, yellow, black band around the chest and cuffs. The merger brought together some great riders, sprinters, Trevor Bull, Fred Booker, Jeff Platten, and I think the great Dave Watkins, who may have gone to Halesowen. They were great road racers, Tony Slater, Wal Stafford, and apologies to anyone not mentioned. I think that the Birmingham RCC won the national team pursuit in the early 70s. I think Fred Booker, Commonwealth Games silver medalist, was second at the National Sprint Championships in '67 at Salford Park, whilst in Rover colours. It was a 3-up final that was so close between the ultra-smooth Fred, Reg Barnett, a Londoner, and Dave Watkins on the line. Dave Watkins pushed so hard he lost his front tyre on the line and hit the tarmac at about 45 miles an hour. But that was Dave, do or die. I think the verdict went to Reg, but it could have been any of them. Incidentally, Dave worked at Dunlop and subsequently becoming MotoGP's top tyre man with patents to his name. I don't think that the GP riders knew what an excellent sportsman and daredevil they had in their midst. That Dave will be missed is without question. But in the not too distant future, you'll summon those wonderful memories of him with joy and happiness, without the sorrow of this moment. We're now going to have that period of reflection. It's an opportunity for you all to think of Dave, remembering all that he meant to you. Those who wish to pray can offer their prayers whilst family come forward and place their floral tributes with him, and it will be accompanied by a piece of music that has a very special meaning for Dot and Dave.
Round like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning on a never spinning reel, like a snowball down a mountain or a carnival balloon, like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon, like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, and the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind, like a tunnel that you follow to a tunnel of its own, down a hollow to a cavern where the sun has never shone, like a door that keeps revolving in a half-forgotten dream, or the ripples from a pebble someone tosses in a stream, like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, and the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. Keys that jingle in your pocket, words that jangle in your head. Why did summer go so quickly? Was it something that you said? Lovers walk along the shore and leave their footprints in the sand. Is the sound of distant drumming just the fingers of your hand? Pictures hanging in a hallway and a fragment of a song. Half-remembered names and faces, but to whom do they belong? When you knew that it was over, you were suddenly aware that the autumn leaves were turning to the colour of her hair. A circle in a spiral, a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning on an ever-spinning reel, as the images unwind, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind.
Thank you. Could I ask all those who are able, please, to stand for the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Could I ask you to remain standing as the time has come for us to say goodbye. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose on earth. Time to be born and a time to die. And here, in this last act, in sorrow but without fear, in love and appreciation, we commit the body of David Robert Watkins to its natural end. Be thankful for his life with us, for the love he gave, for the friendships he sustained, for his contribution to your lives. Dave, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and may the rains fall softly on your fields. Go now, on your final journey, loving soul, to love, light, and life eternal. Thank you. Would you please be seated? Life is a cycle of seasons, every season blending gently into the next. And when our work is done in this world, as we begin to reflect on our family and our life, our last breath is peaceful as we drift into the arms of our loved ones. You will now reflect on a successful life where there has been love, happiness, and togetherness. As this service is about to finish, Dot would like to thank you all for attending today and for the messages of love and support at this difficult time. Donations in Dave's memory will benefit the charity Versus Arthritis, and this may be done as you leave the chapel. And following the service, you are welcome to join Dave's family at the Calderfields Golf and Country Club, Aldridge Road, Walsall. And to complete the service, there will be a last reading read by Claire Charles.
Afternoon. It was beautiful as long as it lasted, the journey of my life. I have no regrets whatsoever said. The pain I'll leave behind. Those dear hearts who love and care, and the strings pulling at the heart and soul. Strong arms that held me up when my own strength let me down. At the turning of my life, I came across good friends, friends that stood by me, even when time raced me by. Farewell, farewell, my friends. I smile and bid you goodbye. No, shed no tears, for I need them not. All I need is your smile. If you feel sad, do think of me, for that's what I'll like. When you live in the hearts of those you love,